Picture a quiet cul-de-sac in the Sun City Anthem neighborhood of Henderson, Nevada. Manicured lawns, a few pines, tile roofs, a Sunday morning that looks like a postcard. At 11:54 a.m. on December 13, 2009, a white Chevy Cavalier rolls into that cul-de-sac and parks near the end of the street. 6 minutes later, a man in a white dress shirt and dark slacks walks out of frame, carrying something under his arm, what looks like a manila folder. He walks with purpose, not looking back. And then, as far as anyone can verify, he simply disappears. I'm Maya Ellison. This is Still Unanswered, and today we're going deep into the disappearance of Stephen Koecher. We're going to take this carefully, step by step, through what we know, where the evidence takes us, and where it stubbornly refuses to lead. I'll be talking with Elder Nathan Cole, who's joining us from southern Utah to help explain the community context that shaped Stephen's life. Elder Cole is a bishop in his ward. He's counseled many single adults through times of financial strain, questions of pride, and the quiet decisions people make when they're under pressure. Nathan, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Maya. I appreciate the invitation. This case, I've followed it, and it's one that sticks with people in our area. It's painful, to say the least.
Before we get into the broader social context, let's meet Stephen. He was 30 years old in December of 2009. Stephen Vell Koecher was born in Amarillo, Texas, raised in an active Latter-day Saint family. His father, Rolf, was a longtime journalist. Stephen studied communications and journalism, worked at community papers, and briefly at the Salt Lake Tribune. He loved music, he coached youth sports, he volunteered. He was described by friends and family as reliable, conscientious, someone who would show up when he was needed. On the surface, an ordinary life.
Right. And that ordinariness, Maya, matters. In our wards, people like Stephen are often the first to answer a call to serve, to work on a project, to help the older folks. There's a culture of doing things for others, and that kind of steady, dependable character makes his disappearance feel, well, it feels contradictory to the person we remember.
It does. But beneath that ordinariness, Maya, matters. In our wards, people like Stephen are often the first to answer a call to serve, to work on a project, to help the older folks. There's a culture of doing things for others, and that kind of steady, dependable character makes his disappearance feel, well, it feels contradictory to the person we remember. It does. But beneath that ordinariness matters. Financial and personal, that were very much of the moment in late 2009. The Great Recession had gutted local hiring. Newspapers and advertising work were drying up. Stephen had moved to St. George earlier that year, hoping for a fresh start. He worked part-time in advertising sales and did door-to-door flyer distribution. He was behind on rent, keeping credit card balances, sometimes scraping by. But he rarely spoke about how bad things were. Some family members say he shielded his parents from the worst of it. You can imagine how heavy that must feel, right?
Yeah, in the church, there's a strong emphasis on self-reliance. That's a good principle. Self-reliance is helpful, but it can also make people feel they must carry burdens alone, that asking for help is shameful. A young man who wants to appear responsible may hide financial struggles, which means those around him don't realize how serious things are until something goes wrong.
And what's striking about Stephen's last week is how purposeful many of his actions appear. We need to walk through the timeline slowly, because the details are the only way we have toward any clarity. On December 10th, 3 days before he was last seen on camera, Stephen left St. George and drove north. He went to Salt Lake City, then west to West Wendover, Nevada, on the Utah-Nevada border, and then turned around and drove all the way back, stopping in Nephi, Utah to visit the parents of a former girlfriend. All told, sources estimate he covered roughly 1,100 miles in a single day. That's not a casual Friday commute.
No. That kind of driving suggests either someone who's job hunting desperately or someone dealing with something intense privately. In the 2009 economy, people would sometimes travel long distances for a single lead, to meet a potential employer, to check out opportunities. But when someone is also trying to hide strain from loved ones, why you do that, why you take those trips without telling anybody, that's where the pressure and the silence meet.
Over the next couple of days, he drives again. Accounts are fuzzy on specifics, but we do know he's burning a lot of miles. Then, on Saturday, December 12, he pays a traffic ticket in person in St. George. That's important. Paying a ticket is the kind of responsible, mundane act you'd expect from someone planning to return home. That night, a neighbor sees him leave his apartment in the late evening. 30 minutes later, the neighbor sees him leave again. He's in his car. He's not packing like he's leaving for good. There's no note, there's no goodbye.
Which, in our understanding, is significant as well. People in our faith, when they travel or move, often tell family, or at least leave a word. So the lack of any preparation suggests either an urgent, sudden departure, or, more likely, that he thought he'd be back soon. You don't leave the things you need for daily living if you're going away on purpose.
Exactly. Sunday morning, December 13, is the day that will define the case. Stephen places a couple of calls to church acquaintances before noon. He tells them he is in Las Vegas and that he might not make it back in time for a church obligation, but that he would come back if needed. There's nothing frantic in his voice, according to those callers. He sounds like someone in control of his plans. At 11:54 a.m., surveillance footage captures his car entering the cul-de-sac in Sun City Anthem. 6 minutes later, he's on foot, carrying what looks like a folder under his arm, walking away from the camera's view. That's the last confirmed visual sighting of Stephen.
Those details, Maya, are haunting because the Sun City Anthem neighborhood is a place where people feel safe. It's planned, it's quiet, and for a man who's usually in church on Sundays, walking into an elderly community like that raises immediate questions. Did he have an appointment? Was he meeting someone? Or did he get turned around and
walk somewhere he shouldn't have? It's worth saying that the cul-de-sac footage shows him walking deliberately, not looking lost, not stumbling, carrying something. People have asked, was it a job interview packet, resumes, flyers, or something else? No one has a verified answer. The car stayed in the cul-de-sac for days, and homeowners noticed it and contacted the HOA. The window washing flyers in the car linked the vehicle back to Stephen's employer in St. George. That's how the family first learned the car had been found and realized no one had heard from him in several days.
I want to add something here about the setting. Sun City Anthem is a retirement community. The sidewalks are walked by seniors. The residents are often home during the day. If Stephen had arranged to meet a homeowner for a door-to-door or advertising pitch, that would make sense. But if he had been lured by someone with ulterior motives, it's harder to imagine someone praying there without being noticed. People watch their neighborhood. That's not to say it couldn't happen, but the environment complicates the picture.
After the last camera sighting, the phone records provide the only real breadcrumbs. Starting that evening and into the next couple of days, Stephen's phone connects to cell towers in a path that moves northeast through Henderson. Around 5 p.m. on December 13th, the phone pings near Arroyo Grande and American Pacific Drive, more than 10 miles from the cul-de-sac. By the early hours of December 14th, it's pinging near the I-515/Russell Road interchange, and then it remains in that general area for roughly 2 days before it simply goes quiet, presumably when the battery dies. So either Stephen himself or someone with his phone was moving north through Henderson after he left the cul-de-sac.
There are, of course, a few interpretations. If it's Stephen, he may have met someone and then gotten into a car that took him away. That car could have traveled those routes. If it's not him, then the phone could have been moved by someone else, discarded, or in the possession of another person entirely. The problem is the phone gives you location data, but it doesn't tell you who was holding it. The podcast, formerly Merchick, continued to share her empathy for Stephen and his family, expressing her disappointment with the tone of the episode.
And we should emphasize that after December 13th, there is no financial activity, no charges, no withdrawals, no attempts to access accounts, no known use of his identity. That undermines the idea that he planned a voluntary, long-term disappearance. He left wrapped Christmas presents in his car and personal items in his apartment. He kept on making routine decisions. He paid a ticket. He offered to return to church if needed. Everything points to a man with plans to continue his life, not to abandon it. Those details make this mess particularly painful for his family.
I remember how the ward reacted to news like this. People were stunned. When someone who's quiet and responsible disappears, it forces a community to ask uncomfortable questions about how we support our young single adults. We ask, did we notice when he needed help? Could someone have stepped in? And sometimes those questions are hard to answer because the person who needs help intentionally masks it.
Let's talk about the searches and the investigation. Multiple jurisdictions were involved. St. George Police, because Stephen lived there, Henderson Police, where the car and last sighting were located, and later Las Vegas Metro assisting. In the weeks and months after his disappearance, there were organized searches, foot patrols, helicopters, cadaver dogs, private investigators. Volunteers combed desert washes and hills south of Anthem. In one private search, volunteers found bone fragments that were later tested and determined not to be human. Searches in 2015 and at other times turned up nothing. Multiple searches, no confirmed trace.
When searches don't find anything, people tend to fill the silence with speculation. We saw that after a while, online sleuths, message boards, people mapping his long drives. I've seen it bring useful tips sometimes, but it can also lead to false leads and to families being overwhelmed by noise.
One of the more sensational theories that floated around was a supposed connection to the disappearance of Susan Powell, who vanished a week earlier in December 2009. That theory was investigated, and according to police and both families, there is no evidence linking the two. There was no known contact between Stephen and Susan, and family members on both sides dismissed the idea. I want to say that because when a high-profile case hits the news, unrelated names get dragged into the story, and that can be harmful. It diverts attention from real leads and from the people who matter, Stephen and his family. We need to keep our focus on facts.
Amen to that. People will try to connect dots that aren't there. It's part of human nature, trying to make meaning of randomness. But for families, every spurious link is another way the grieving process is distorted.
Let's spend some time on theories, because for listeners who want to think critically, it's important to weigh possibilities without claiming certainty. Theory 1, voluntary disappearance. Stephen chose to start a new life. The arguments for it are mainly financial. He was behind on bills, likely embarrassed, and he took long, secretive road trips. Arguments against it: he left Christmas presents, he left his personal items, and he never used his accounts again. Also, he had close family ties and a religious community that mattered to him. On balance, it's possible, but the evidence doesn't strongly support it.
From a pastoral perspective, when people do choose to disappear, there are often signs: withdrawal, unusual spending, or plans that are more concrete. Stephen's life didn't show that. So, while it's not impossible, it sits low on the probability scale for me.
Theory 2 is suicide. Financial and career stress can absolutely lead someone to consider that, but friends, family, and church leaders report no clear signs of suicidal ideation. He bought gifts, he kept plans, and those elements push against the suicide hypothesis. Also, importantly, no body has ever been found, despite extensive searches. The absence of conclusive evidence makes this theory uncertain too.
We also should remember that people who are suicidal sometimes hide it very well. The absence of outward signs isn't absolute proof. But yes, the lack of remains and his outward planning behavior make me think it's less likely.
Theory 3 is foul play. Stephen went to Anthem for a specific meeting, and something went wrong. This theory gains power from the simple fact that he parked in a residential area on a Sunday and walked off with a folder. Maybe he had an appointment. Neighbors canvassed by police didn't recall arranging to meet him, and there wasn't a clear online trail to suggest a meeting with a stranger. But there are plausible variants. He could have been responding to an ad, a job lead, or an invitation from someone he met briefly. If he went with someone willingly and then was harmed, we may never see the early signs. It's a bleak possibility, but it fits with the lack of later financial or digital activity.
Right. From what you describe, it's possible he was meeting someone, perhaps a homeowner, perhaps a contractor who needed help. The manila folder is the kind of thing you carry to present materials. If you imagine a scenario where he meets someone and then is offered a ride, if that ride becomes a route to harm, it leaves little trace in a surveilled neighborhood. In some ways, urban environments offer both visibility and anonymity.
Theory 4. Accident. Maybe he left his car to hike, got injured in rugged terrain, and succumbed to exposure or a fall. The hills south of Anthem are rough, but several times the phone pings track north into Henderson, not south into the hills. Searches in plausible places found nothing, so this theory is possible, but not strongly supported by the available digital trail.
And let me add, deserts are tricky places. People can get disoriented quickly, even in cooler months. Still, the fact that the phone moves toward more populated corridors suggests something else. Perhaps a move into town rather than into the desert.
There's also the painful reality of online sleuthing and rumor. At one point, an IHOP regular was rumored to be Stephen. The family checked and concluded that was not him. The Susan Powell connection came and went. These distractions highlight how, in the absence of a clear path forward, people will grasp at almost anything. That makes it harder for family and investigators.
Those false positives can re-traumatize families. A well-intentioned tip that's incorrect becomes a fresh wound each time it surfaces in the media.
We've talked a lot about the evidence and the theories. Now I want to turn to the human toll. Stephen's family, his mother Deanne, his father Rolf, his siblings, worked tirelessly to keep the story alive. They coordinated searches, they spoke with media, they maintained online pages. Rolf, who had been a journalist himself, was particularly active and said something to the effect of, "Here's a young man who had a bunch of friends, and he just disappears on a beautiful Sunday morning in a really nice neighborhood. it doesn't add up." That quote was reported early on. Then, in February 2011, Rolf died unexpectedly after years of working to find answers. He never got the closure he sought.
I think about the family, the kind of ambiguous loss they suffer. No body, no definitive answer, changes how you grieve. You hold on to hope because it's impossible to fully mourn without confirmation, and that hope keeps you searching. For people in the ward, watching that unfold it's humbling. It's a reminder that sometimes faith communities must support long, open-ended grief.
And they did. The family continued searching, worked with private investigators, participated in a televised episode of Investigation Discovery's Disappeared, and never stopped advocating. Many of the searches were volunteer-driven: neighbors, strangers, online followers who wanted to help. In 2015, another focused search scoured hills south of Anthem. Despite all that, no confirmed trace of Stephen has been found. The case remains open.
That's why ongoing public attention matters, but it also has to be guided. People should know that if they have credible information, they should contact the Henderson Police Department or Crime Stoppers. Anonymous tips can be helpful. What you don't want is a flood of unvetted rumors.
Right. If you're listening and you think you know something, even a small detail, please contact Henderson Police Missing Persons or Crime Stoppers. Say what you can, when you can. Every small piece is a potential link. Do not, please, speculate publicly in ways that could hurt the family. This is an active case for detectives, and tips should go through official channels.
Maya, one practical thing I'd add for listeners who are part of faith communities: sometimes the best help you can give is to notice the quiet ones. Reach out. Ask direct questions about practical needs, rent, work, and be ready to help without judgment. There are cultural barriers to asking for help that, if we're aware of, we can gently lower.
That's a good point, Nathan. Back to the details for a moment. There's an oddity about the car. When authorities inspected it, they found wrapped presents and pillows and blankets and flyers, small clues that his car had become a kind of mobile base. That detail is troubling in a practical way. It suggests the car was used a lot and that he might have slept in it during road trips. But nothing in the car or in his apartment pointed to a planned disappearance. Also, the phone's later pings near the freeway ramps and interchange have made some investigators wonder, was the phone in a vehicle? Was it thrown from a moving car? Or did someone with access to the phone abandon it in that area?
All sensible questions. If someone wanted to, say, move a phone to a busy intersection to make it look like the person traveled there, it would muddy the trail. But those are the kind of intentional acts that are very hard to prove without a confession or independent witness.
We're often asked, could modern technology have found him? People think with the proliferation of surveillance cameras, license plate readers, and phone location data, disappearances are impossible. The truth is more complicated. Cameras are directional. They don't cover everything. Phone towers give you broad areas, not a pinpoint GPS trace, unless the phone is using data in a way that records precise coordinates. In 2009, Google Maps and smartphones weren't as ubiquitous as they are today. We have some digital breadcrumbs, cell tower pings, surveillance footage, but not enough to build a continuous map of his movements. Remember, most of what we have are snapshots, not a continuous film.
And human behavior complicates things. If Stephen met someone in person and got in a car, you're relying on the honesty of whoever he met, on any witnesses, on people remembering a man who might blend into a crowd. In retirement communities, people recall faces, but sometimes not names. By the time investigators come knocking, memories have blurred.
As this episode nears its close, I want us to reflect on what this case reveals about vulnerability, humility, and how an ordinary life can become an unsolved absence. For the family, the last decade and a half has been an exercise in perpetual limbo. They live between hope and dread. Rolf's death became a symbol of that, a father who never received answers about his son. That grief is ongoing.
If I may, Maya, there's also something communal here. When someone disappears, it tests the social fabric. Wards and neighborhoods respond with searches and prayer. But perhaps more lasting is the need to change how we attend to those who are quietly struggling. Practical care can be a form of prevention, checking on rent, on work hours, on signs of desperation, without shaming the person who needs it.
That returns us to the core themes of this case: the ordinary life, the puzzle of intent, invisible pressures, and the heavy weight of not knowing. Stephen was a young man with responsibilities, with faith and family ties. His disappearance raises questions about whether anyone saw what he needed before it was too late, and whether someone else, malicious or accidental, intervened in a way none of us can reconstruct with certainty. For listeners who want a clear answer, I'm sorry to say we can't offer one. All we can do is look closely, weigh the evidence, honor the family, and keep asking questions. Nathan, final thoughts?
My heart goes out to the Koechers. I would say to listeners, don't let cases like this fade from memory just because they haven't been solved. Share responsibly. If you live in a community like ours, be present. Offer help, practical help, without making the person feel like they failed. And if you have information, contact the authorities. That last point matters.
Thank you, Nathan. And to everyone listening, if you have information regarding Stephen Koecher, please contact the Henderson Police Department Missing Persons Unit or Crime Stoppers in the Las Vegas area. Your tip could be the small, critical piece that makes other pieces finally fit. I want to close with something Rolf said early in the investigation, paraphrasing, that it doesn't add up. For the Koechers, that lack of fit has persisted for years. For the rest of us, the case is a reminder of how fragile the fabric of ordinary life can be. We'll keep this story on our radar at Still Unanswered. We'll keep asking, and we'll keep listening. If you saw something in Henderson around December 13th, 2009, no matter how small it seems, please call. If you were the person who pulled into that cul-de-sac and waved at a stranger, if you were the homeowner who answered the door that afternoon and remember a man with a folder, call. Information doesn't expire. We owe that to Stephen and to families like his. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Maya. And to the family, God bless you. We're still thinking of Stephen.
This episode of Still Unanswered was produced and hosted by me, Maya Ellison. Elder Nathan Cole joined as a guest to provide community context. Our reporting is built from public records, news reporting, police statements, and the work of family and volunteers who have kept this case active. If you want to look into the case more, please do so responsibly. Use official channels for tips and be mindful of the family's pain. Join us next time when we take up another unresolved case, another ordinary life that left behind unanswered questions. Until then, take care of each other.